Bonjour à tous. Oh, welcome and greetings from my office in Waterloo, Ontario, the territory of the Neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. My name is Richard Florzone, and I am CEO of the International Institute for Sustainable Development, or IISD, and I'm your moderator for today's event. Partnering for climate, increasing resilience through nature-based solutions. That's an important, but it's also a rather complex title. At its core are two powerful and important ideas. First, partnering for climate to increase resilience. Now, we all know that climate change is a real and growing threat, and Canadians understand that we have a responsibility to both mitigate it as well as adapt to its impact. But that responsibility isn't just at home. It includes partnering with developing countries, supporting those who are least responsible but often hardest hit by the effects of climate change. Second is the idea of nature based solutions, of investing in and alongside nature to better protect people, to adapt to climate change, and to support biodiversity. Now, I'm here because IISD is passionately committed to both of these ideas. We run the National Adaptation Planning, or NAP, Global Network, where we are directly assisting over 40 developing countries to adapt and build resilience to changing climate. And just last year, ISD launched a new global center for nature based infrastructure dedicated to increasing the adoption of nature based solutions. So, supporting resilience by investing in nature. That's why we're here today, celebrating an important announcement and a discussion with three esteemed panelists. First, we have Canada's Minister of International Development, Harjit Sajjan. Minister Sajjan was first elected as MP for Vancouver South in 2015 and served as our Minister of National Defence from 2015 to 2021. Minister Sajjan, I have to add that your previous portfolio is a powerful addition to today's topic, since climate change is, of course, a top risk identified by defense experts. And nature-based solutions are a powerful tool to improve human security, investing nature to better protect people where they live. Next on our panel, we are so fortunate to be joined by the Honorable Augusta Maida, Mozambique's Minister of Sea, Inland Waters and Fisheries. Minister Maida was also formerly the Director General of Mozambique's National Disaster Management Institute, giving her a first-hand perspective on climate risk and disaster. Minister, as we were chatting before we went public, I know Mozambique has been hit hard by extreme weather, including Cyclone Idai in 2019 and Cyclone Ana just last month. I also know that Mozambique has been making significant progress on your national adaptation plans, building resilience to those increasing storms. Third, I'm very pleased that we are joined by my colleague, Mary McDonald, Senior Vice President and Chief Conservation Officer for WWF Canada. Now, Mary has led conservation initiatives across 5 continents, a very impressive record, and her expertise in her role at WWF, which is, of course, Canada's largest international conservation organization. So let's begin our panel discussion. Minister Sajjan, extreme weather is increasing, directly impacting Canada, but developing countries also, like Mozambique. What has Canada's international climate finance been able to achieve in tackling these issues over the past 5 years? Minister.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you much for the question. But before I begin, I do want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and also the point that you raised. This topic has been extremely important from my previous portfolio. So now that I get to go into a new portfolio and actually deal with a lot of those these very important issues, and I also just wanted to acknowledge my 2 colleagues who are also on this panel here, from Minister Maida and Nancy as well, from the World WWF Fund there. So when it comes to this for climate change, it's extremely important, and I'm very proud of our government's achievement on climate finance. Now, as you know, that we announced a $2.65 billion climate finance commitment, and it's on track to help almost 6 million people adapt to climate change, and also to reduce and prevent over 200 megatons of greenhouse gas emissions. And that's the equivalent of taking close to 50 million cars off the road for 1 year. And that's a big deal. And our commitment Also, the gender equality also had a ripple effect, supporting urgent sustainable development goals and helping advance the Paris Agreement. But we know that we have much more to do, and we can do things better. And in 2020, we consulted our partners about our next commitment, and we heard that we need to increase funding for climate adaptation, tap into the expertise for civil society, and especially Indigenous people in Canada, and integrate nature-based solutions. So we have listened, and we are taking that input very seriously. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Minister. So let's talk a little bit about what's next. Canada has upped its commitment. The Prime Minister said we're going to double our commitment to international climate finance. I think the government's been quite public about, I think, targeting 20% of that towards nature-based solutions. Can you tell us how does Global Affairs, how do you intend as Minister to build on those achievements and move ahead and implement some of those commitments that the Prime Minister has talked about?
No, thanks. And this, and we're really excited about this because it's such an important topic. So, based on what we heard in 2020, so our government, we doubled, as you know, our climate finance commitment to $5.3 billion. We increased funding for climate adaptations and putting a significant focus on nature-based solutions and biodiversity. But as part of that focus and adaptation, I'm pleased to announce the launch of Partnering for Climate. Now, this will channel $315 million over 5 years to support projects from civil society and Indigenous peoples in Canada for climate change adaptation. Now, this funding will tap into the deep expertise of the extremely wide network of Canadian partners and especially Indigenous peoples. 300 million of the Partnering for Climate funding will support projects exclusively in sub-Saharan Africa and use nature-based solutions to build resilience and address biodiversity loss. And $15 million in funding will support Indigenous peoples in Canada to partner with Indigenous people in developing countries. Now, this is a clear reflection of the value that Canada places on Indigenous environmental knowledge and stewardship. And I'm really excited to get moving on this. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Minister. Look, thanks for that announcement. That's great to hear. Right, Canada, we know Canada needs to do more to live up to its international obligations on international climate finance, and others have talked about that. But this doubling is clearly a very powerful step forward. The focus on sub-Saharan Africa, as I said earlier, focuses on those who are least responsible but often hardest hit. So very well done. And the investments in nature help us not just to build resilience, but give us those other benefits of hopefully strengthening biodiversity. So a great announcement. Minister Maida, let's turn to you, and we want to hear right from Mozambique. How do you see announcements like today, and specifically investments in nature-based solutions? How can they help increase resiliency, enhance the livelihoods of people and communities in Mozambique, and respond? How do we respond and prepare for some of the cyclones that have hit your country and that are, of course, getting worse as part of climate change? Over to you, Minister.
Thank you. Oh, let me start by congratulate the government of Canada for once again showing its commitment toward this investing in actions to mitigate the ever-increasing impacts of climate change. Honorable Minister Sanjan, allow me to start this intervention by thanking you for inviting Mozambique, myself particularly, to take part in this launching of these great news for us who are dealing with these natural resource issues. Um, Dear colleagues of the panel, all protocol observed. As I said, I would like to also wish to convey my sincere thanks for inviting to addressing this important event, which for us it's still a strong sign of the value that Canada assigns to our cooperation as partners. It's also a clear indication that Canada sympathizes with the current difficulties that Mozambique is facing as a result of the impact of climate change. We've talked about this. Mozambique, as I can mention, is committed to at the higher level to face the adverse impacts of the climate change at this result in recent appointment of the President of the Republic of Mozambique, His Excellency Philippe Jacinto Nyusi, as the African Union Champion of Natural Disasters Risk Management, owing to the easy effort to fight the impacts of natural disasters in Mozambique, with Mozambique being highlighted for the way it is institutionalized, organized to deal with extreme natural phenomena, and for its ability to avoid the loss of lives and property. Mozambique, in particularly due to its location, Mozambique Channel, is extremely vulnerable to this climate change, which results in change on weather and temperature patterns that are conditioning for increase in frequency and intensity of natural stress, such as cyclones, floods, strong winds, and increase of seawater levels. Um, the data that we have to show with you show that the frequency and intensity of the tropical cyclones has increased in the past 20 years. If you look at the figures from 1980 and 1997, five tropical cyclones hit Mozambique coast with a wind speed of about 92 to 142 kilometers. From 2000 until nowadays, we have noticed that about 2 to 3 cyclones are registered per year with the winds of about 200 kilometers per hour. We all remember the terrible cyclone Idai and Kenneth that devastated our country in 2019. And this year, as I mentioned earlier, we have already witnessed two another cyclones, Anna and Batsirai, which have had consequences to the livelihood of our population. These events affects the population, the economy, and especially in the fishery sector, fishing and aquaculture communities are the most affected with the destruction of their means of work, fish ponds and cage, depriving our fellow citizens of carrying out their economic activities and obtain means of livelihoods. Mozambique is still working to help their citizens and communities to adapt and to the negative impacts of these climate changes. We need to invest in prevention, and we are working to invest in prevention and adaptation and bring together not only the government but also local communities and the other international partners to address these challenges. We also need the investment in women as agents of change, as a third part of the population of Mozambique are based on the coastline. Due to our vulnerability as a country, our government approved in 2012 the National Strategy for Adaptation and Mitigation on Climate Change as an instrument of to contribute to prioritization of climate change with a view to increase the resilience of the communities and the economy, including reducing climate risks. In recent years, as a response to this increasing resilience, the government of Mozambique has carried out several actions, including the response to the global SDGs and having also revised the national determined contribution from the period 2020 and 2025. In ongoing action, the government has sought nature-based solutions to increase the level of resilience and the protection of coastal communities' livelihoods. These solutions involve greater conservation and preservation of marine and coastal ecosystems to avoid significant adverse impacts and ensure greater health and productivity in our oceans. Our government also approved the mangrove management strategy, and in 2020, the National Program for the Restoration and Preservation of the Mangroves. These instruments are helping our government to cope with these issues on climate change adversities. In these two strategies, so far we have managed to restore for about 3,000 hectares of mangroves. We do have a goal of about 5,000 as our commitments from the SDGs to try to establish, to set this goal. However, the achievement of the target will not be enough if alternative livelihood to the coastal communities are not set in place. This is one of the issues that we address. Specifically to address the vulnerability of coastal communities to climate change, Our government, through our ministry, implement a pilot project in some coastal districts, and this project aims at establish sustainable livelihoods for coastal communities to strengthen resilience and coexistence with fishery resources as well marine ecosystems, which we believe is in line with the initiative that is being launched today. And we would like once again to congratulate you on this initiative.
Thank you, Minister Maida. You know, it's very clear from your comments, as you said, the science is clear, right? The severity and the frequency of these storms is increasing. You spoke to the very real impact, and you spoke to how some of these solutions, including investing in nature, can help. We're going to come back in a moment back to the impact, specifically on women, because you talked about impact on fisheries, and we know from our work that the role of women is quite unique because of their unique role in food and water, in agriculture, and in fisheries. That the impact on women can be quite disproportionate. We're going to come back to that topic, but first I want to turn to Mary. Mary, we've just heard from Minister Maida about these investments in nature. You and I, I think kind of agree on this topic about the multiple benefits we get from investing alongside nature instead of against it. That we get the good outcomes and not just good environmental outcomes, but good economic outcomes. But I wonder if you could tell us from WWF's perspective and your own work, how can nature-based solutions support adaptation to climate change and also generate these biodiversity co-benefits at the same time?
Sure, Richard. Thank you for the question. I think first I want to acknowledge this exciting and important announcement. Thank you so much, Minister Sajan. It's a really interesting and groundbreaking approach, and it's really, really important, as everyone's been saying. And also to Minister Maida, thank you for sharing so much about the interesting work that you're already doing in Mozambique and the opportunities that you're hoping to pursue related to this announcement. Okay, let's go. Sorry, I just want to look at my notes here. So at WWF, our focus is on nature-based climate solutions because they link increasing biodiversity with building resilience to climate change. And in many cases, they can also contribute to reducing greenhouse gas levels by capturing and storing carbon in natural systems. The best nature-based climate solutions do all these things, and they contribute to social well-being, as has been mentioned, through job creation, local economic development, and enhanced equity, especially for more vulnerable populations. Nature-based climate solutions are about taking action to protect, restore, and maintain ecosystems over the long term. Healthy ecosystems are vital to abundant biodiversity. When coastal zones, which Minister Maida referred to, grasslands, woodlands, savannas, and other natural systems become degraded due to climate and also to other pressures like development, agriculture, mining, or infrastructure, they become less able to self-sustain. Damaged or destroyed ecosystems reduce the availability of food, water, and other resources for communities, for wildlife, and for the economy at large. They also lose their ability to naturally protect against severe climatic events like flooding or drought. Restoring and maintaining degraded ecosystems offers the promise of greater resiliency, and if it's done in the right places in the right way, can significantly contribute to reversing biodiversity loss. In Canada, the Sepwepemculu Restoration and Stewardship Society is restoring forest ecosystems following extensive wildfires. Based primarily on indigenous knowledge and woven with Western science, the Society is building back biodiversity of the region by planting native trees and complex plant understories for food and medicine. Important fish and other wildlife habitat is also improving. The project is creating local jobs, reducing risk of severe wildfires, strengthening ecosystem adaptation, and increasing the capacity to store carbon in nature. Because WWF Canada is part of an international network, our Sepwepemc colleagues have indicated that they're keen to share their knowledge and to learn from others in different parts of the world. We've all heard that biodiversity loss and climate change are both accelerating. The timing for this initiative is good. The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is issuing a report on adaptation and impacts at the end of February. We know they're going to stress the value of taking the co-benefits approach exemplified by this program. It's great to see Canada continue to take a leadership role in this space. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Mary. Look, just to amplify some of what you've said, look, if we invest, as you've just summarized, if we invest alongside nature instead of against it, we can achieve much better outcomes. Of course, it has to be in the right places and right ways, as you said, but we can actually reverse ecosystem damage, improve resilience, as you pointed out, and get good economic outcomes. And that's not well understood, that these can really be win-win-win projects if they're done right. So listen, I want to go back, just back to the gender question. So I've asserted, just chatting with Minister Maeda, that the impact is disproportionate on women. Mary, I wondered if you could comment a little bit on that and also share your perspective on how we can ensure that women are at the center of efforts to increase resilience and to adapt to climate change. Any thoughts on that, Mary?
Yeah, just some straightforward thoughts that I'm sure many people share here. The most important thing, ensuring that women are at the center of efforts to increase resilience, adapt to climate change, and grow biodiversity, is recognize that they have real knowledge to share and supporting that knowledge. You need to participate in decision making. We need to ask them what's important, how they think we should do it, and support that with training and financial support. And I also put in a little bit in this group that Indigenous peoples are also essential contributors in some of these same ways.
Thanks for that, Mary, and thanks for also echoing the point about Indigenous knowledge, which I think the minister will come back to as well, which is part of today's announcement. That traditional knowledge of stewarding ecosystems is really powerful. Minister Maeda, on this gender question, why does it matter? Can you paint for us a little bit more why women's perspective matters, and then how do we ensure that that they're incorporated as we think about our plans to adapt to climate and build resilience?
I think I totally agree with Mary when she says that women must be in the center of the whole perspectives in terms of planning process. If they don't take part, it's really problematic. In countries like Mozambique, where we are so vulnerable, the most vulnerable are the women's. If you want to look at the face of the poverty, you first look at the women's. So it's not smart from our side if we can't bring women to the center of the decisions in terms of the policy as a whole. So we do recognize this in our sector, in the fishery sector mainly. We know that it's a mainly based space when we talk about going to fish, but there is a whole entire value chain in this that women can take benefit on this and bring them together to this discussion. And also we are implementing several projects on aquaculture where we do believe that there is more room for women to take part, not only as a part of the decision making, but as part of women who can actually produce and use their knowledge to transfer this knowledge to their children and the community. Because this solution based on nature are I think first of all based on the people, and the people are in the center of this engagement, and that's why as a country, I think Mozambique has improved and moved forward in terms of our regulatory framework to bring together all these community-based solutions to bring more the ones that we think that we don't want to leave them aside. So in this perspective, I think that looking at the restoration and the effective conservation, for instance, for the mangrove ecosystems, which is strongly community-based action, is one of the opportunities that we think that we can engage women's, as well as in the development of the value chain of artisanal fisheries products, as I said. In our case, Mozambique has 19% of fishery production coming from artisanal sectors. Is where we have 90% of production. So I think it's where we should still concentrate our effort. There's also a huge potential to engage actively women and young unemployed people to participate in aquaculture, as I said. This is a huge opportunity. We are talking about 4 million tons of potential, and we still use 1% of this potential. So I think there is still a room for us to engage women, engage young people to try to make a difference and to try to cope with these climate change issues. And lastly, we believe that it is important to align global finance with ecosystem conservation objectives to allocate resources specifically to support women as well as to integrate gender in solutions to empower women and girls as powerful agents of change. We do really believe in this perspective.
Well, thank you, Minister Maida, for sharing that firsthand. It's very powerful. And, I just want to amplify one thread of what you said because it's really quite simple and compelling. We know climate change is real. We know, therefore, it's impacting things like fisheries. Women have a unique role in fisheries. And so they've got a unique role in thinking about planning adaptation. We have to engage them. And I also want to say that is very consistent with what we've heard at ISD from our other partners around the African Great Lakes, the fisheries and the role of women in the fisheries around African Great Lakes. So thank you for that, Minister Sajjan. So we've just heard we want with this international climate finance to support and assist those most vulnerable and least responsible for climate impacts. That includes women. How do we ensure that women are at the heart of building climate resilience and this new program that you're announcing? Over to you, Minister.
No, thanks, Richard. And I mean, it's not just about this program; it's about putting into everything that we need to do and put it into policy. This is, I mean, as you know, that we launched our feminist international assistance policy in 2017, which recognized the importance of putting women and girls at the center of solving development challenges. So it's in everything that we do. So now here we want to put the focus on nature-based solutions, partnering for climate projects, and we know that will help build climate resilience, especially for women and girls, and they need to be part of this. So this is why 20 million of the $300 million for climate adaptation in sub-Saharan Africa will support projects working at the intersection of women's rights and climate adaptation. Plus, I also want to emphasize that we also remain committed to ensuring that 80% of our entire climate finance will be gender integrated. So this is very important. It's about not only that we got to be able to listen to all the advice, but actually then put it into policy, then turn it into action. And that's exactly what we're doing now. So these commitments reflect the reality that women and girls are more vulnerable to climate change, but also they have important knowledge that can lead to finding good solutions as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Minister. Listen, I could carry on this conversation for many hours more, and Mary and I will with our colleagues as we continue to advance this. Minister Maida, with countries like Mozambique, thank you for being here, Minister Sajjan. Mary, thank you all for your great comments. Let me just summarize. The reason why I'm so excited about this conversation, today's announcement, is it really responds to the facts on the ground and what we need to do. What are the facts? We know that there is a climate crisis. It's undeniable, the scientific fact. And Minister Maida spoke to it about the increasing frequency and severity of storms. It's just a measurable fact, and the science shows that that will continue. A fact is that we have an obligation to respond to those scientific facts, both in Canada and abroad. We have an obligation to help those who are most vulnerable and often least responsible for this crisis. And that includes, in particular, women and girls. And that includes engaging Indigenous people in finding solutions. Third, we know that nature-based solutions can be a really efficient way to tackle this real crisis. What we have to do is stop investing against nature and investing alongside nature. It turns out that planting mangroves and restoring forests is not just cheaper and more effective than pouring concrete, but it also can give us these other benefits like increasing biodiversity. So fourth and finally, again, I want to applaud you, Minister Sajjan, and the government for this investment because it responds exactly to those facts. It provides financing to partner with developing countries to pursue these nature-based solutions in a way that engages women, that makes a real difference to build resilience and adapt to climate change. Thank you again to all of my panelists. Thank you for those joining. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to advance our work to build a world where people and planet thrive. Thank you all again.
Thank you so much.